good morning. Wow, minus 1 million degrees. I didn't even know it was possible to be alive in this. It's crazy. Facebook's exploding because I put photos of frozen waterfalls and all my friends are sending me back photos of the beach in Sydney where I'm from. So I never thought you could measure love, but this is how much I love this man, to move from the beach in Sydney to here. Thank you all so much for coming this morning, for coming out not only in the cold, but also to give me your attention. Your attention is the most precious thing that you guys have. And for you to direct it this way for the next hour, although I did a PowerPoint last night, so we're probably going to be here for about 4 or 5 hours, if that's okay. Settle in. And I love this stuff, and so I get super excited. But Gary, we need to be done by about 20 past or 25 past, is that right? Your attention is the most precious thing you have, and I'm grateful for it. And any moment to be able to share this wisdom, these experiences that I've had, and this incredible way of looking at the world. In Australia, we have a custom that's called Welcome to Country, that the Indigenous Australians have. Anytime you gather on a beautiful piece of land that allows you to come together as community and to learn and to spend time together. If you're not an Indigenous Australian or an Aboriginal, then we call it an acknowledgement of country. So I just want to acknowledge the history of this land, the caretakers of it in the past. I believe that the Dakota Sioux and also the Ojibwe, I think, were here as well. It's really amazing to look at the space that's here, to know that if we didn't have somewhere to come, we'd probably be all sitting at home, staring into our computers on the internet, trying to learn about things. So acknowledging the custodians, traditional custodians of the land, also the current custodians, thanking Gary and Nancy and everyone else who puts their time and energy into this beautiful place here. And also the future custodians, and again, that's us. If you guys don't show up, there is no energy and there is no draw for this place, so thank you for coming. Okay, I'm from Australia originally, and I was trained originally as a veterinary surgeon, but over the years I've become fascinated in these new sciences that they're discovering, which are beginning to explain spirituality. And in a lot of ways, we're using science to give people permission to be spiritual. The theme for January here at Lake Harriet is celebrating what's right for the world. And what I wanted to invite you guys to consider today is that what's right with the world is actually what's right with you. There's this thing called the quantum field, or the vibrational nature of the universe. There are these ideas that say that what's outside of you is actually a reflection, a mirror of what is inside of you. They're beautiful concepts, but to be honest, when I started to dive into all of this work, I was like, what does that even mean? You know, take responsibility inside first before you see change outside, or be the change you want to see in the world. And so I loved those as philosophies, but I didn't really understand how I could ground that in myself, ground that in my understanding of myself, and even begin to change myself so I could change the world around, right? So I'm a nerd by nature. I'm trained as a veterinary surgeon, but I've also studied and practiced yoga and meditation for over 18 years. And I started to have these extraordinary experiences, these shifts in consciousness, these changes in my mental and emotional state. And I always wanted to explain them. I wanted to understand them. I didn't want them just to be a philosophy, you know? So I like to join the dots. I love this big creative explosions, but I also like everything to be explained and to be replicable. And so who here has heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza? Could you just raise your hand? Yeah. And I love this up the back. I think you guys came for children's yoga, didn't you? But it happens to be cancelled, so here you are in the room with us today, so I love that. So Dr. Joe's one of the main teachers that became well known through the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? He's very well known because of his passion for making the extraordinary very replicable. Okay, for being able to explain why something miraculous happens and giving people permission to apply a practice to begin to choose to change their life in that way. And I love that. I was just hanging out with him all day on Tuesday, flew into Seattle, almost died of depression from the clouds and the rain there, but I managed to get back here. Anything makes this look good is going to Seattle, so you guys have it good. Don't tell them I said that, and this is actually going to be on the internet, so we have to bleep that out, Jay, I think. So I want to dive in to these bigger concepts, and I want to join some dots, hopefully, for you guys. Instead of having this idea, or even it might be a belief, you might truly believe that you're spiritual and you have this greater version of yourself, but then there's this physical experience of you. And a lot of the time people think, I am a physical being and I've got to go to yoga and have a spiritual experience, and then once I've finished my yoga, I go back to being spiritual. And then I'm going to go and do meditation for 20 minutes and attempt to reconnect to that spiritual nature. And then I'll go back to my life and I'm being physical again, right? But what if it's a continuum? What if you're always connected? And 100% of the time you're spiritual, and what we're learning to do is be physical. So I want to explore an idea today that we have a vehicle here on the planet. I know this sounds a little bit different to the neuroscience of meditation, but we'll get to that at the end, right? We have this vehicle here on the planet. And not only are there ways that this vehicle is running that are very clear and systemized, but there are road rules. There are universal laws in a system of information around us that we also have to understand. And this mirror nature of the universe, or this reflective nature of the universe, is where we want to dive into today, so that you guys find out that if you want to see peace in the world, you have to create peace internally first. If you want to see love, if you want to see healing in the world, it has to happen internally first, and then it will be reflected outside. Okay? So let's get into it. I'd love all of you guys to start to sit there and take your awareness inwards. You have a body. It is not the limit of who you are or what you are, but you do have one, and it's an extraordinary thing to have. It's beautiful. But if we were going to trace it down, I want you guys to find out what you're made of. So I started to do this myself. This was my journey, and the reason I was on this journey was because a lot of my family had died of cancer, and I was terrified. I thought this physical body was all that I had, and I thought it was running itself. So I wanted to get in contact with the information that was running the body, and I wanted to really understand who I was in connection to both my body, and if there was a higher source, I wanted to find out where I was in that sort of lineage. So I traced myself down. We have this body, and the body is made of organs. Your brain, your heart, your liver, your lungs, these are all organ systems, and they make up part of your body. When you look at the organs under a microscope, you see that each tissue looks different, and the tissues are made up of cells and fluid, and the cells and fluid are made up of molecules. Those molecules are created by atoms. Looks like this. Your whole body comes down in this sequence, from body to organs to tissues, down to the cells and the fluid, made from molecules created by atoms. And then what happens? Because you guys, each of you, are a bunch of atoms there, just sitting there. So if we can figure out what each atom is made of, then we're going to be able to find out what you're made of. Does that make sense? Right? So I like to hang out, and if you guys want to hang out with me, I'm working upstairs and we're running workshops regularly to dive really deeply into this work. I like to hang out in a place where things get weird. We don't want the norm. We don't want something that's super replicated and systemized like that. We want something weird, and then we make the weird systemized. So things get really cool with the atom because there's quite a few weird things that we like to experience and dive into. Every atom, and you're made of atoms, is made of two types of thing. You have the physical part of it, and then you have the space or the energy or the information in between. Does that make sense for you guys? Yeah? So just like if I was baking a cake and I was going to say there's a statistic that this cake is 50% flour, 20% eggs, 20% water. I don't do much baking, so if I'm wrong there, don't hold it against me. But what we're looking for is how much of me is physical and how much of me is this energy or information in between. Sorry, I can hear something rustling the microphone. Is that better? Yeah. So it's an interesting question because we are this physical person, but we are also this energy and this information, this spirit. So there's a really cool statistic. How much of us is space and information and how much of us is physical? Every single one of you is 99.9999999999999% nothing. Information, invisible energy. 0.000000000000001% of you is physical. In every atom, but your atoms make the molecules that make the cells and the fluid that make the tissues that make the organs that make your body. So when you look in the mirror and you see your physical body, you're looking at a tiny fraction of who you truly are. Super weird, right? You're such a bunch of weirdos. But that's why I love you. There's something even stranger that happens. For a little perspective, if we were looking at the atom, there's so much space and information in between, they just draw these diagrams so that we can get some kind of concept of it. But to give a perspective, if that little blue and yellow bit, which are what we call the subatomic particles, if those little bits were the size of an SUV, and those little red bits on the outside, the electrons, were the size of a pea, they would be spinning. We're going to put the SUV in the middle of Washington State, and the electrons are around the outside of Washington State. That's the scale of it. Okay? It's crazy weird. And so then we get to weird fact number 2. So one of the things that Dr. Joe loves to talk about is that the classical view of the atom, where you see it like a little solar system with that stuff in the middle and the particles spinning around the outside, if you were going to draw a picture of it to scale, this is what it looks like. 99% space, nothing. It's blank. Pure potential, pure information. Weird fact number 2, even those little subatomic particles are not permanent. That is so weird. You're not physically permanent. Those particles are pulsing and changing from matter to energy, matter to energy, matter to energy, 7.8 times a second. 7.8 times a second, particles are pulsing back into what we call a field of information and collapsing once again to express a physical version of themselves. 7.8 times a second, you have the opportunity to gain a different set of information from the field and express a different version. 7.8 times a second, you have the potential to change. And yet most people experience their life like a hamster on a wheel. The same thoughts, the same emotions, the same behaviours, the same physical expression of themselves moment to moment to moment. Sounds pretty crazy. So we start to understand that we're not just physical, and in fact the physical version of us is a tiny part of who we are. This is a vehicle being expressed from this field of information. And what we start to see is that these particles, when they puff back into this wave of potential, they go into a field that's unlimited, unboundaried. There are no specific limitations there. Imagine this information if we went back to this idea. Imagine you came in with a tumour in your body. Something's happening at the level of the cells and the organs and the tissues. And you're working with a person who's only been taught one body of knowledge, and they're doing their very best and they're there for you and they love you, but they only believe that the world is physical and that your body is physical. And now that tumour is going to grow and it's going to express itself in a certain way, and it's probably going to stop the function of the organ and therefore the function of the body in about 6 months. And you hear that and you say, absolutely, I understand I'm in this current state. But then you walk out of there and you say, this is really interesting because the information that's flowing to those organs comes from the cells and the fluid, and those cells and fluid are made from molecules and atoms that are coming from a field that has the potential to change 7.8 times a second. Very, very interesting possibility. So what we're doing is taking our awareness from just this physical body that seems to be on a very specific timeline and inviting ourselves to expand our understanding into something much greater, because that 99% of us holds information, highly intelligent information. So we start to think of it as information, and we want to turn those arrows around, and instead of our physical body attempting to reconnect back into a field, We're literally collapsing waves of possibility into a physical expression of ourselves from this field. I want you to fall in love with this. This is spectacular. You, every single one of you, are spectacular. Your body is made up of close to 70 trillion cells, and every single second you have hundreds of thousands, if not trillions, of biochemical reactions happening, creating a level of order. Are you guys thinking about that? Are you in conversation? You're like, hold on a second, I just have to go and make 14,000 million blood cells. Okay, I'm done. You know? There is intelligence flooding into you every millisecond. I'd like to watch something now just to bring this into your awareness and for you guys to fall in love with you. Some more statistics before we do. Your heart beats more than 101,000 times a day. Your heart pumps more than 2 gallons, or 7.5 litres for anyone in Australia who might watch this later on, per minute. And every day you inhale 2 million litres of oxygen, and every millisecond that's transferred to the trillions of cells in your body. Amazing. So let's just have a look at this. So the reason I came into all of this work, because I was about 30 years old and I was miserable. I'd lost my mother to cancer. I'd lost a lot of family members to cancer. And people around me seemed to be dying. There didn't seem to be a lot that was right with the world. And I didn't know how to change that. I didn't know how to get in touch with, if there was a great creator or a God, to get in touch with that person and say, listen, I'm having a bit of a tough time. You know, get on the bat phone to the universe, as Elizabeth Gilbert calls it, and just have a word, you know. I wanted to find out where I was as far as accountability and responsibility for it. I was having a tough time internally, and I also felt very separate to the world around me, like it was happening and I just had to try to survive. So when I started to explore all of this information, I think this might be the thing making the noise, and fall in love with the potential that there's an extraordinary amount of intelligence running through my body every second, I was like, this is awesome. I want to talk to this intelligence. But maybe I am that intelligence. Maybe there is a God, but maybe I am that God. Imagine that. So if we look at it from another perspective, instead of that sort of sequence going down, think about it as, this is an expression of the human experience. We have a physical body, we have a biology to us, and we're a system. You guys all agree that you are experiencing the workings of a system? And this was this was me when I was studying to be a vet. I fell in love with biological systems, and I wasn't fascinated by the differences, but the similarities. You know, it didn't matter whether it was a single-cell amoeba or a fish or a cat or a horse, a dog or a human. Everything had this incredible ability to not only survive on the planet, but also to thrive. So we could see we were just using information internally and also having to live in a bigger system and be able to survive. So listen, if a system's kind of sitting there working all the time, no one really cares how it works. Do you know what I mean? Like if it 100% of the time is working well, no one's going to go over to it and try to figure out how it works to fix it. Because the only time we look at the workings of systems is if they're breaking down. So when the human condition started to experience breakdown, everyone was diving into it to try to see how they could adjust the system. And we grew up in the West, most of us here, I'm assuming, grew up in the West. And the West is logic-based in its understanding. It will believe what it sees. So it wanted to start to affect the human system. It cut it open. It had a look at the way it worked. Yeah, and it started to look at, there seems to be an operating centre. There's a pump. It's compartmentalised. You have to put fuel in. You have to take waste out. Looks like a machine. Looks like a machine. It's beautiful. It's intricate, but it's pretty much a machine. It's going to start running, and then it's going to run until it conks out, right? And so they will only believe what they'll see. And so when the West started diving into things and made microscopes and looked at smaller and smaller levels of the human, they got down to the atom. And they were still happy. They could measure everything. They had maths and physics that worked out. They could photograph stuff. But as soon as they started to look at everything under the atom, the subatomic world, or what we call the quantum world, things started getting really weird. Their maths didn't fit. Their physics didn't fit. and things started showing up in two places at once, and everything looked like it was tangled up, and there's this thing called the observer effect where things didn't happen until they turned around and started to look at it. And so science was like, that's weird, it's invisible, we're going to give it to religion. They did 300 years ago. Descartes and Newtonian physics handed it all over, and they said, anything that we can't prove and measure with our science, we're giving to religion. And they separated us. Oh, I've got a little pointer. Nick. Separated us, and they disconnected us, right? Amazing. Have a look at that again with my pointer. Very good. And so, but the truth is that there's a continuum. There is no separation, so once again, let's trace it back. If I want to affect my physical body, I can do surgery on it, right? Anatomy, there's this biology to me, which is amazing. But there's also a chemistry to me. The biology is the cells, the tissues, and the organs. The chemistry, we're getting down to the cells and the fluid. I can change the way my system functions by taking chemicals. What are some examples of chemicals? Alcohol's usually the first one everyone yells out, right? But aspirin, food, anything of a chemical nature, we exist at that level, absolutely, and you can change the way you function by interacting with your body at the level of chemistry. Science even knew that there was a maths and a physics to us. We use ultrasound, we use x-rays, we use radiotherapy to change the way the system's functioning. But it still shuts itself down when we get to this incredible place where everything expands. Philosophies from the East, the Indian traditions, the Asian traditions, all of the indigenous cultures knew that the actual flow was from information down into physical, expansion down into specific experience and expression. You have, I don't care what you guys call it, you call it God, you call it the great creator, Atma, quantum field, universe, source, universal intelligence, but if you can understand that there is this incredible level of information that's flooding in to create those hundreds of thousands of biochemical reactions in trillions of cells every second. Amazing. But is that a God or is that you? Because if it's a God, and this was my experience, I'm like, if there's a God, I need to talk to them because my brain's going crazy. I can't stop these thoughts. My emotions are all over the place, and my life is just rubbish. I want to talk to that God. So who am I? What is my consciousness? How is it using this brain? And where's this boss that I need to get in touch with? So let's have a look, and I'd like all of you guys, once again, these are not concepts outside of you. I'm asking you to go into your system. You have a brain. It's a squashy, pinky, grey thing in your head. If I take it out of your head and I put it next to you, Pete, on the chair, it's not going to do anything. And neither are you, because I've just completely removed your brain. But when it's in your system, it's working, and your system works. So one of the first ways we start to liberate ourselves from this system is we say, all right, there's an organ called the brain, and when it's functioning, just like the heart has a function, it pumps blood, right? The brain has an action, it has an activity. The brain's function, a lot of the time, is to create thoughts. Thought after thought after thought. Electrical activity. But you have a bunch of thoughts strung together. Happy thought, happy thought, happy thought. And you've got a state of mind. Sad thought, sad thought, sad thought. Sad state of mind. Jealous, judgmental, a bunch of thoughts strung together, but it really is the activity of the mind, the activity of an organ. But here's the cool thing and where things get weird. If I'm in Australia, I usually swear a lot more during this, but I have to tone myself down in America. It's very good for me. So the cool thing is, where things get weird, is that you have this brain that's active producing the mind, but you guys can observe that. You can separate yourself out from the thoughts that you're thinking. You can notice what you're thinking. You can even analyze it. Wow, thinking this is really making me feel bad. Not only that, you can change it. You can change the way you're thinking. And in that moment, I want you guys to understand, you're changing the way one of the most powerful supercomputers in this universe functions. Who's doing that? right? Because the activity of the brain is creating these thoughts, but you are this non-local observer, this non-local consciousness, this extraordinary awareness that can change the function of the brain as the operator, as the orchestra conductor, as the driver of the vehicle. You guys with me here? Well, it's a lot to do on a Sunday morning, but what else would you be doing? Eating eggs probably somewhere and staying warm. So we have this vehicle. We understand that there's a continuum of information flowing down, and that once we arrive as this information, we still have to use this brain. It's just part of the working system though, okay? You are a great awareness. And the separation between God and physical, or spirit and physical, is not the body and this greater intelligence. You and God, or you and the Creator, are shoulder to shoulder as an awareness. It just happens to be an awareness that's been around a lot longer. Yeah? So shoulder to shoulder, let's do something, let's have an experience, let's create this physical body, and let's flow down there 7.8 times a second into a space-time reality on this thing called planet Earth. And once you're down there, don't worry about it. You've got this amazing vehicle that you're going to use on the journey of your life. It's called the body. It's got an operating center that you can use. It's called the brain. But you are not your brain, and you are not your mind. You're an awareness that can use it. Are you guys with me on this? Yep. So there's this incredible vehicle, but there are also road rules. And by the way, it's not an automatic vehicle. It's a stick shift, right? So it's a little bit more complicated to learn to drive. But it's very, very systemized. And a lot of the time when we're working with this stuff, I like to use this analogy because it's kind of like the work that we do is we're jumping out on the road and everyone is just crazy all over the road, right? They've come down onto this planet and they want to go from A to B. They want to experience their life. It's going to be the journey. And they knew that they were going to need a vehicle. But they got here and no one told them how to use it. You know? So you arrive and someone's like, oh, here's a little piece of metal, which is a key, but you've never seen a key before. And there's a big chunk of metal outside and it's going to help you. Good luck, I've got other stuff to do. So you go out and you see other cars driving around, you know? And you're like, well, I guess this is the vehicle I'm going to be using. And after a while, you might be able to work it out, and some people might zoom past and scream some advice out the window, but they don't even know what they're doing in their vehicle, so they don't have much time to stop. Yeah? So I'm there on the road and I'm like, oh my goodness, pull over. Everyone pull over. Yeah? Hop out of your car for a minute. I want you to understand there's a very clear way that your system works. You have a brain that's been wired over your life. You have a body that's expressing itself through the thoughts and the emotions and the behaviors that you have. And this is your vehicle. There are rules to the vehicle. Don't drive in first gear for your entire life. Don't press the accelerator and the brake at the same time, right? And so a lot of the work that we do, and we don't have time to go deeply into it today, is how does the actual brain function to create the thoughts and emotions that are your experience? How does the brain and the emotion function to drive the behaviors that create the patterns that you experience in your life? It's just like in a stick shift where first you have to do very specific things, clutch and then change gears. You can't do it all at once, and most people are never told that. So first of all, we learn about the vehicle, but it's no good learning about the vehicle and then zooming off the wrong direction and having a head-on collision, right? Because there are road rules. And that really is where we come to today with this starting to have a look at, maybe I'm part of a larger working system. I do have this vehicle, but it's not just running by itself. It's interacting moment to moment with a quantum field or a pulsing universe around us. So the way that we look at it is that this brain that creates these thoughts that you think and has an effect on the emotions that you experience all come back to this vibrational nature of who you are. Remember, you're made of energy. You're made of information that's pulsing and changing 7.8 times a second. What happens is it creates this torus field of energy, this beautiful shape, sort of donut shape, three-dimensional shape of energy and information, that 99% of who you are. And that creates a radio frequency, a signal that interacts with the world around you. You guys have all heard of the law of attraction, have you? Yeah? So what is that, Like, what does it even mean? And it turns out it's all based on vibration. In the quantum world, we start to look at this understanding that the world doesn't actually exist. It's not fixed ahead of us. It's not some physical experience that's already there. That's a very Newtonian way of looking at things. In the quantum model of reality, we say, I am this vibrational being, and I stop still in the present moment. And the moment I stop is the moment that the world changes into pure potential, pulses and waves of absolute possibility. And in the quantum world, we have these potential life streams stacked one on top of each other ahead of us. These are like a radio signal, right? 94.2, 103.5. These are life experiences that we get to choose, but we have to tune into them. And the way we do that is by changing the information from our system. And this is all ruled by the way we think and the way we feel. Our system interacts with the road rules around us, which is that the world is actually coming towards us as waves of potential. We call it in. There's a magnetic resonance that draws experiences to us. Who's heard of the observer effect? A lot of you have heard of Joseph, obviously you've heard of that kind of stuff, dived into all this. Where you place your attention is where you place your energy. And energy creates reality. It happens at the subatomic level, at the quantum level. When they started doing those that research and started to observe that particles began to collapse depending on how and where they were paying attention. And so the Newtonian physicists say it only happens for the subatomic world. It doesn't happen at in the greater world. And Dr. Joe always says, maybe we're just not that good at paying attention. What if we're able to begin to master our awareness, begin to pay attention, and all of a sudden we begin to collapse more and more information into a reality that reflects what we choose it to reflect. Does that make sense for you guys? Yeah? Where you place your attention is where you place your energy, and energy creates reality. So many people spend almost all their time mulling over the past, right? Paying attention to everything that used to be. And if you spend all your time paying attention to the past, and where you place your attention creates your reality, why are we surprised when it shows up again in the future? There's the hamster wheel right there, And so we want to be able to start to step into this present moment and begin to release our attention away from the past and direct it towards a future that we choose. There's this idea, I do not know how that happened. Help, please, John. Current slide. Yep. Slide. Thank you. So, what's right with you is what's right with the world. The world ahead of you is absolutely pure potential. The world exists as pulses of energy, and it's a world of free will, and you get to pay attention to whatever you want to. But if we're looking for a world that's filled with peace, and we're fighting with ourselves and hating ourselves and judging ourselves, why are we surprised when that shows up in the society around us? If we're looking for a world that's filled with acceptance, and we're judging ourselves and judging those people around us in our inner dialogue, in our inner emotional state, creating a frequency and tapping into a stream, why are we surprised? Dr. Joe's always saying, you can't sit down in the morning and meditate on peace and love in the world and then get up and drive to work and flip off the person that cut you off and walk out of your car as a raving lunatic with road rage. Starts inside, and the science shows that we are a pulsing wave of information, and you are the person that sets the default frequency. The way you think and the way you feel and the actions that you take over and over again set you up as an information system that's interacting at a particular level of reality. But that reality is an illusion. And that's a beautiful thing. It's not a frightening thing. That is the most liberating thing in the world, because it means that you don't have to go up to every person that's irritating you and ask them to change. You get to go inside. But by the way, this is like 100% responsibility, right? 100% accountability. But I wouldn't want it any other way. It was a little intense when I first found out about it, I won't lie. I was like, oh my God, I had spent 20 years blaming everything around me. I feel bad because this person died. You know, this person's being awful, and so I feel bad. But I went inside, and everything I saw outside of me, I was actually doing towards myself. The judgment that I was projecting towards others, I was judging myself like that. And we see that there's this cyclical nature to this world within us and around us. And because there's this information flooding in moment to moment to moment, it can either be fresh information from a field of universal intelligence and unconditional love, or it's the same information that we've been thinking and feeling with repetition for 20, 30 or 40 years. The potential to bring in new information all depends on you guys individually and how you decide to change the way you think and the way you feel. It's a co-creation for sure. But because of these infinite potentials, as you have people coming towards you in your life, they exist in infinite versions of themselves. So that person who's in your life can come to you as someone that is going to be a victim because you're playing the victim, or is going to be the perpetrator because you're addicted to being a victim. Or you can change who you are and that person shows up as a different version of themselves as well. And what's right with the world is what's right with you. Your self-love, your peace, your self-acceptance, your confidence. And there's only one exception to this, and that's when the Vikings lose. That's their fault. But I was trying to tell my fiancé, I'm like, I think you're addicted to being disappointed by your team. And he's like, personal foul, that's unnecessary. You're out. But it is, right? It's curious, especially with what's happening in the world. Because so many people who fall in love with this thing called the law of attraction love to tell people what a manifestor they are. I'm amazing, I created this abundance, I created this wealth. But all of that hatred that's happening over there, that's got nothing to do with me. I'll take responsibility for all the good stuff. But the bad stuff, that's that section of society. You know, I'm going to leave it up to them. It doesn't work like that. 100% responsibility. And we've seen it happen in so many ways in all of this work. I'm going to start wrapping it up. I'll have a couple of questions in a sec. These are Dr. Joe's 3 books. Evolve Your Brain was the first one. Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One. Very good. And You Are the Placebo, Making Your Mind Matter. So we have these incredible opportunities to not only change our inner world, but also to contribute to a world around us. And there's a thing called the Institute of Heart Math. Have you guys heard of that? Yeah, they've done an amazing amount of work to measure the human energy system, but also to understand how we are contributing to a global information system. Just like we were talking about the cells of your body, gathering together to be able to function as organs, to be able to give life to you as a body. Every single one of us is a cell on this planet. We're a living representation of life, but we can only take responsibility for our function. If our liver cell had to try to get in contact with our brain cell because it thought it was doing the wrong thing, it wouldn't work. So every single one of us, the more we change and master our own internal function by the way we think and the way we feel, by making our actions and our behaviours consistent with our intentions, the more we create an epicenter of what we call coherence or balance or harmony, and that contributes to this global community. So what's right with you becomes what's right with the world. Does that make sense? Yeah. So there's a huge amount of information there for you guys, and all I'm passionate about is First of all, expanding out to say, I'm not just this limited physical version. Secondly, this physical version I'm experiencing is just a result of the thoughts and the emotions I've been feeling and thinking over time. And that I am important. The way that I behave and the way that I think affects the world around me because I'm a vibrational being and I'm creating this incredible reality around me. I am important. Every thought is important. And now do you see why I said your attention is the most important thing, the most precious thing that you guys have? So are there any questions? We've got 5 minutes before something. Yes, Navi? Mm-hmm. Right, so you're walking in a timeline. You start to feel bad and you enter into a timeline that represents all of those emotions and it begins to cycle back in on you. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And this is the human experience, right? The human condition. So from the quantum perspective, there's sometimes a lag phase, so you have to think, and Dr. Joe talks about this in his book, Breaking the Habit. It's called thinking greater than your environment. If you only ever think equal to how you think and feel triggered by the environment outside of you, you're never going to change, and neither is the world around you. You have to think greater than, you have to feel greater than the environment, than everything that's coming at you. But for me, I've found that sometimes you can't just think your way out of stuff. Positive thinking alone doesn't work. And so a lot of the time I'll use something like tapping, because the experience that you're going through that's repetitive is an emotion, right? You're locked into a vibration or a magnetic experience that's drawing all of that rubbish in, right? And then you're going to trip over and lose your phone and all this kind of stuff. So I use tapping or emotional freedom technique to really move out of that. Other things to find out what is locking me in, why my thoughts are constantly cycling back in. So stream of consciousness journaling, things like that. Does that make sense? Have you used tapping before, or EFT? Yes, yes. Well, we're going to do it in April at the workshop. So the workshop that I run in April is going deeply into these concepts of quantum physics, neuroscience, the stress response, how to turn that off. But we also use tools, so it's not just philosophy. You've got to really learn, once I understand myself at these bigger levels, how we can apply specific tools to be able to access ourselves at that level. Yeah? Yes, we've got time for one more question, and then we're going to do the collecting donations for here. Yes, hi.
So do you do any sort of classes with talking about the different vibrations of the Schumann resonance and stuff like that, and trying to get in touch and tap into those natural resonances and vibrations within the world of people?
So in the workshop, at the end of the second day, we do a vibrational sound immersion. So the theory on the second day is really saying, all right, what is frequency? And you know that music video that we watched, The Miracle Is You, listen to the music inside. We are all vibrating at particular frequencies. So I do use sound healing, but I don't go into too much detail about it yet, but we absolutely use sound healing and use frequencies to affect our frequency. You know, it's a very, very powerful way. And if you're going to look at this idea, if you want to affect a system, you may as well get closer and closer to the source to be able to affect you and to get into what we call coherence. Yeah? So coherence is balance or harmony. And we want our system to be able to be set up to be as close to the frequency of this universal field as possible. Okay, so thank you guys so much. As I said, there's I call it the rabbit hole. It's my office up here in the corner. If you want to come down the rabbit hole, come and visit me there. We're going to be doing this workshop. There's an introduction to the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, Candace Pert, Greg Braden with the vibrational nature of the universe. We do a bunch of stuff. My passion is to provide information, but also to create community. Information alone is just philosophy. You guys can read about this on the internet. Change happens when you practice stuff, when you're in community, when you're having a great week and someone else is having a terrible week, and we can all continue to learn about how this stuff works. Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. If you'd like to close your eyes and take your awareness to the center of your heart, right into the center of the chest. And just begin to breathe into that area. As you inhale, it expands. And as you exhale, it just drops back down gently. Inhaling, expanding the heart space. And exhaling, letting it drop. And as you inhale, please add the emotion of gratitude and fill your heart space with that gratitude. Thank you for this building and this space and the warmth. We're so lucky to be warm. Thank you to this planet who's resting while she makes it warm on the other side. And thank you to community, creating an epicenter of unconditional love, of gratitude and of joy here this morning. Take a big breath in and let it go. Beautiful. Open your eyes. Thank you so much to Lake Harriet, and thank you for the coming today, Linda. Yay!